Hi, I'm Cathy. I'm an alcoholic, and I have some experience with these steps as they're laid out in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous with the guidance of a Big Book Step Study sponsor and a loving God. And I have made some amends, and I have a few left to go, and I practice the steps to the best of my ability on a daily basis. Thank you, Cathy, for asking me to speak this morning, and it's good to be at a meeting. So my experience with this step. So yes, I'm a real alcoholic. I'm powerless over alcohol. I was when I got here, and I continue to be. And my life was extremely unmanageable when I got here, and it continued to be after I got here and after I put down the booze. By the grace of God, I got to Big Book Step Study at about a year and a half of sobriety, extremely miserable, and was introduced to the steps as are laid out in this book by a Big Book Step Study sponsor, and that, in my opinion, has made all the difference in my sobriety and my recovery. And what was it like for me? Yes, my life was unmanageable. So yeah, I was a blackout drinker from the first time alcohol was in my mouth at the age of 15. And my drinking at the end, I was pretty much a daily drinker. Maybe I could go a day or two during the week without drinking, but that became less and less possible. Drinking was my coping mechanism. And sometime in the last 2 years or so of my drinking, I began to consciously try and control my drinking. And, all those things that are talked about on 31, limiting the number of drinks, limiting what I was, drinking, all of that. If I would just drink wine, I was only going to have 2. I wasn't going to drink during the week. I was only going to drink all of that. And at the time, of course, I didn't realize that when I started, it's that paradox, when I started trying to control it is when it started to control me. It had taken over. I had lost control. And yes, my life was unmanageable. My life was unmanageable, 1, because of the booze, 2, because of my attitudes and my behaviors. And, these are things that took, by then, 45, 47 years to develop, right? Somewhere in my brain was lodged this concept that everything was up to me. Self-reliance was my God throughout my life. And, somewhere in our literature it uses the term headlong assault. And my life was a headlong assault to whatever I set my sights on, whether that be school, education, relationships, people, things, whatever it was a headlong assault for me. And what I came to realize after doing this work, it was just one big pursuit of something outside of me to fill up something that was missing from the inside. And I had no idea until I did this work what that was or what it might be. And it was God. It was having a spiritual relationship with something outside of me, but something that I have learned is very much inside of me. And something that was much bigger than me. That notion of self-reliance and, that kind of manifested itself in my life as having to fix everything. And what I learned through this work is, more often than not, whatever those things are or were, really for the most part, were really none of my business. And so it's been this slow sort of process. I'm definitely, in some of our other readings, it talks about a spiritual experience being of the educational variety, and I definitely fall into that category. I'm definitely a testing, 1, 2, 3 testing. And I have learned through the pain that comes with that, that self-reliance runs really deep with me. And I've learned through the pain that comes with those experiences that when I'm able to let go and let God, that incredible things happen in my life. And, so let me take it back to the book a bit here. So when I sat with my sponsor and read, so we read together. We read this together, and she had me do the underlining and looking up words. And, my first thought about that was, well, I have a degree in English. I don't need to look up words. And at one point, I did take a whole course, and this is years and years ago, on actually the dictionary. So, yeah, I did understand that, this book could be a helpful thing. And now I look up words all the time. And so, to get the understanding, it really took me to sit with somebody and take me through this. So the notion that it talks about here that that I'll be like normal drinkers, that I'll be able to drink normally someday, that was pretty much driven home and smashed in the reading with my sponsor. That there was going to be no going back. And I think also in the last 2 years of my drinking, realizing pretty much about the last year and a half that I was probably an alcoholic, but I wasn't ready, able, or willing at that point to give up. It took me hitting a bottom, essentially armed with a company-issued BlackBerry, a huge resentment against my boss, and the fear that ensued out of a stupid act of sending him a stupid email one night when I was drunk. That got me here. So really what got me here was fear. So I value fear in my life. I valued it then, and I still value it today. I think I'm more aware about how much fear drives my life and has driven my life. And I think I'm more aware of it. Can I tell you that I have no fear in my life today? No, I can't tell you that. Fear is still there. I would like to think that it operates on a healthy, instinctual basis now, more so than it did before. My instincts definitely run amok. And so, when that expression in here that talks about lack of proportion exists and has existed in my world. It existed with the booze. It can exist with other things too. I have really come to realize that in my life the word boundaries didn't really exist so much in a lot of areas. And this lack of proportion can still occur today. Shopping, if you like one, you really need three. Different colors probably, but, that sort of thing. So yeah, boundaries exist, and there's an awareness now about boundaries in my life. Workaholism, I've suffered from that too. I don't do that so much anymore. Can I tell you that I don't do it at all? No, I can't. That wouldn't be the truth. So yeah, lots of unmanageability. And that's, as I said, the unmanageability, that drove me to acts that were inappropriate, which led to fear of losing everything I had, my job, my livelihood, my house, my family, et cetera, et cetera. That's what got me in these doors initially. What got me to Big Book was really the fact that I was miserable still. Because I hadn't really done any work. And I had no idea I heard people say in meetings, when people talk about working the steps, what does that mean? I learned what that meant by doing these steps out of this book. And I can't do it alone, and I didn't do it alone. I needed that guidance. The other point that was driven home by my sponsor in this reading was that I'm not able to quit my booze, my drinking on a non-spiritual basis. And I love this reading. I love this part. Jim is my guy. I really identify with Jim. Jim he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. I really identify with this part where he talks about going to work. And he felt irritated, and he had to go to a concern that he once owned. And he had some words with his boss, but it was nothing serious. And, I really suffered from that quite a bit. It was nothing serious. It wasn't that big of a deal, right? Yeah, all the time. And I had some major resentment issues. And a lot of it had to do with my desire or my drive to try and control people, places, and things. And I had no control. I had none at all. And to really learn how to have to surrender to that and just let things go. Just to show up and do my part and just be another worker among workers. And that's been a long time coming. After I did this work, I still struggled. And because it was almost like I felt like if I wasn't in there minding everybody's business, that somehow that was irresponsible and I wasn't doing my job, and Lord knows they were paying me all this money, I had to step up, right? And it took me a long time to figure out where I was crossing the line. A long time. And to quit blaming other people and really look at myself. What was going on with me? And that's after sobriety. That's after doing the step work. Like I said, educational variety. That's me. So yeah, Jim, I love this here. I actually counted all the I's. So on this page 36, there's 24 I's, 0 mentions of God or higher power, and 0 mentions of another alcoholic. So Jim was right out there on his own, doing his own thing, right? And he was not being any too smart. He had a lot of self-knowledge, and, you know, that has plagued me as well, right? That's right in there with the self-reliance, the self-knowledge. And, you know, that worked its way into my step work. You know, I was all about giving myself instructions at different points. After I did, you know, all my writing, I made my list and ranked it, put it in Excel, and I ranked it by in order of frequency, so I knew right there what all my fears were, what the top 10, right? I had my top 10 fears, and I had my top 10 defects of character, and I knew, but guess what? That didn't help me at all either. That self-knowledge didn't help me either. I had to ask for those things to be removed. And more was revealed as time went on in terms of my behaviors. And, you know, I kind of liken it, you know, when those big trucks, they back up, it's like beep, beep, beep. You know, I'd find myself in situations and it would be like, what the heck are you doing? Because now I was armed with the awareness that this is a defect. And so, you know, leaving that situation and just praying for help, just to get out of it, for something better. Yeah, so the vague sense that I was not being any too smart. And this still pops up in my life today, you know? What are you doing? What's going on? What's going on with you? The lack of proportion. If 1 is good, 3 is better. I still don't know what this thing here means about drinking deliberately instead of casually. I don't know what drinking casually is. I still don't know what that means in this book. Still don't know. Maybe I need to look up that word, huh? I always drank deliberately. It was always for effect. Again, you know, it talks about the jaywalker is the example. Crazy, huh? But I kept going back for more, you know? That car kept turning into the package store on the way home from work because something didn't go my way that day. And that's the only way I knew how to deal with it. So we talked about self-knowledge a bit. That subtle insanity which precedes the first drink. That's all there was. That's all there was. So yeah, I guess the level of my mangling was that fear that I was going to lose everything. And ironically, you know, when I first came in and I had about, 8 weeks sober under my belt and quit going to meetings for about 2 weeks. I had family in town and they couldn't know. They lived out of state and they couldn't know. And yeah, I got pretty jiggy by then. I was ready to jump out of my skin. And I went to a meeting and left that meeting. I got myself a sponsor, and I said to her, well, you know, for a while I was thinking that maybe I wasn't so bad. You know, that thinking started to creep in. Maybe I wasn't so bad. And she said to me, what it says in here, well, why don't you go out and try some controlled drinking? But I had already done that for about 2 years, and I realized, I had the wherewithal to realize at that point that, no, you did do that, and that didn't work, did it? So I hung in there, and things did get better. So I still believe today that I don't have the mental defense against the first drink. I believe that wholeheartedly. I do believe wholeheartedly that all of that has to come from a higher power. So many things, you know, that I'm powerless over. that I have to just surrender. I have to surrender to something bigger than me. And I have to quit relying on myself, and that means reaching out to not only a higher power through prayer and meditation, but also to other alcoholics. And so with that, I think I'm going to close. I'd love to hear from the rest of you. Thank you.